Hello and welcome to Tech Deals CPU performance comparison. We are testing 4 different processors today, 2 new and 2 old. The AMD FX-8300, the AMD Ryzen R5-1600X, the Intel i7-2600K, and the Intel i7-7700K. The 2 old CPUs both have DDR3 1600 and the 2 new CPUs have DDR4 3200 MHz RAM installed. We have 16 gigabytes of main system RAM. All 4 computers have an AMD RX 488 GB card. We're playing at 1080p with high detail preset. Fraps was used for the game performance numbers you will see at the end of this video, but it was not used to record the video you're watching. Instead, AMD's Relive software was used to record the gameplay. It has about a 5% impact on performance. If you are recording the gameplay or live streaming using AMD software, this is exactly the performance you can expect to get. If you are not, then you can add 5% to the numbers you see at the end, and that'll tell you how fast your system will run. The numbers in green at the top left corner of the screen are from MSI Afterburner, a free program you can download and use yourself to see what your computer, your CPU, and your RAM are doing in real time. It is a wonderful tool to figure out what is limiting my performance, what is my computer doing, how much of my RAM am I using, am my CPU limited, am my graphics card limited, because otherwise you're just guessing without information while you're playing the game. This video is one in a series that I'm doing on these computers. I will not mention everything in every video or they would all be tremendously long and I'd just be repeating myself. The very first video I did, which was on Grand Theft Auto 5, will be linked in the video description below. It is a longer video that has a lot of backstory and a lot of thought process behind why these processors are here, what the settings are, why they were chosen, and so on. So if you have not watched the 4 CPU comparison on Grand Theft Auto 5, check it out, linked in the video description below. Even if you are not particularly interested in Grand Theft Auto 5 performance itself, I spend a lot of time in that video talking about these 4 processors, the clock speeds, RAM speeds, overclocking, and various uses of these machines. So go check that out if you have not already done so. This playback you're watching at the moment was on the FX-8300, our oldest and slowest CPU in this test. Now, this is an 8-thread processor, and this is an important point because it's equal in terms of thread count to both of the i7s, although not the Ryzen 5. But I first want to draw your attention to the RX 480 graphics card at the top. Now, it's at 100% or 99% a lot of the time, but you'll notice that it dips down. Look at that, it dipped to 13, 54. Every time you see that RX 480 come there, it just went again. Every time you see it come off, that's because we're CPU limited. The CPU is starving the graphics card. Putting more graphics card here would not make this game run any faster. In fact, what we really need is a faster CPU. Now you may say, wait a minute, we have an 8-thread CPU here at 4.2 gigahertz? How could we possibly need more processor? Simple. Clock speed is just a number. All it indicates is the speed at which the transistors can switch inside the chip. It's not a measure of performance. The Ryzen 5 1600X CPU is running 200 megahertz slower than this, but rest assured, it kicks the FX83's butt. Now, one of the reasons I'm including the FX8300 here is not because I'm suggesting you all go buy one tomorrow. It is of value if you're on the extreme budget end of systems today in 2017, and you will be able throughout 2017 to find them, especially on eBay in the used market, to buy the newest, latest, greatest processors. The real reason it's here is if you own an FX8300, is it time to upgrade? Is it worth upgrading? Is there enough performance in the new chips to upgrade? Now, to some extent, that's a personal choice, and that's going to be true also for the 2600K on the i7. If you have a second-gen machine, is it now worth upgrading to something new? So I'm showing you 2 old and 2 new CPUs. One thing I don't recommend anybody upgrade to at this point would be a dual-core chip. If you are operating on a dual-core chip, I want to draw your attention to line 3. We are using 80% of this computer's processor power. We have 8 threads. This means we're using 6 and sometimes 7 of them. Now, it's not pegging out at 100%, but we just touched 92%. That's actually into the 8th thread right there. We are using all those cores and all those threads. This is an important point because a year or two ago, that was much less common. The standard advice for many years has been 4 cores or 4 threads is all that you need to play any game on the market. Well, it is true that 4-core or 4-thread CPUs will still play all current games on the market. They don't do so as smoothly as they used to. This is also why, honestly, my recommendation if you're buying a new processor today is the Ryzen 5 1600 or 1600X. The reason being is while 8 threads is great today, if you're buying a computer that's supposed to last you for 3 to 5 years, what happens when 8 threads becomes the minimum in a couple of years? You're going to want more than that if you want to maintain great performance. Just like 4 cores was all you really needed, but now we're kind of into 8 if you'd bought a machine in the past couple of years, if you go ahead and get a 6-core 12-thread machine, you're future-proofing yourself, meaning you're pushing out the date at which you actually have to upgrade your processor. Now, you will need a graphics card upgrade sooner, and that's been true, frankly, for many years. You need to upgrade your graphics card twice as often as your CPU. We do, after all, have a brand new graphics card installed in this nearly 6-year-old machine. Having said that, the performance is wonderful. Look at this. We're getting 60 frames per second on average, give or take. There's 70. Of course, we're not in combat. It was below that earlier. We're using 8 gigabytes of system RAM, which is why I highly recommend 16, because Windows would be using every ounce of the 8, and it can never use all of it. Highly recommend 16 gigs of RAM for AAA gaming in 2017. And the last thing I'll point out is the VRAM usage. We're using 4.1 gigabytes. The reality is the 4 gigabyte version of this card would play this game just as well. You don't need the 8 gigabyte version for 1080p gaming. For 1440p or 4K, that's a different story, although this card wouldn't play this at either resolution, quite frankly. I do recommend the 8 gigabyte version for many people at this point, especially if you're putting it in a new machine. Why? Because the price difference has dropped. On the day I'm recording this voiceover for The Division, the price difference was less than $40 between the 4 gigabyte card and the 8 gigabyte card. If you are not strapped for cash, if you can afford the extra $30 or $40 the 8 gig cost, you insulate yourselves for a couple more years against increasing texture resolutions of games. You will still be able to play all games that come out over the next 3 years on a 4 gig card. I say that 100% comfortable in that prediction, and the reason for that is because game companies have to make their games work on 3 and 4 gigabyte cards, because not everybody is going to have an 8 gigabyte card, even 2 or 3 years from now. People don't tend to upgrade all that often, and so game companies want to sell their games to millions of people, and there's still a lot of people today in 2017 that have 2 gigabyte graphics cards, and those will play The Division, although not on high detail. They'll have to set it to low or medium. Now, I think that's enough on the FX-8300. You get an idea of the combat, the gameplay, the frame rate. You can see the CPU usage cycle in real time, the graphics card usage cycle. That's the point of showing you these. You can absolutely skip ahead to the end of the video if you just want to see a bar graph with some frame rate numbers on it, but it doesn't tell the tale. What were the frame times? How smooth was it? Was it controllable? How much VRAM was being used? How much percentage of your CPU and graphics card was being used? That's the kind of thing that benchmark charts don't tend to tell you. Frankly, in my opinion, if all you want to do is see some charts, go to Tom's Hardware or Anatech or Tech Report or any of the other excellent websites where you can just see page after page of charts. I often look at those to get a rough idea of how various CPUs and graphics cards perform, because many of those sites do an excellent job of technical numbers. But what they don't show you is the actual gameplay, real-time numbers as the game is being played, which is why, even though The Division has a built-in benchmark, notice I'm not using it. I have run the built-in benchmark on all these machines. I've run it on other machines. Let me tell you, it does not reflect the performance of the game. The primary use of the built-in benchmark is designed to give you a comparison between different machines. It's a relative indicator of this machine is X faster than that machine, except it doesn't tell you will the game actually play on any of those computers. It does tell you which computer is faster, but it doesn't tell you what'll happen if you build or buy that computer and you buy the game such as The Division and try to play it. Everything from Grand Theft Auto 5, which has a built-in benchmark, Rise of the Tomb Raider, which has a built-in benchmark, all of which have some level of deficiency in trying to tell you, will this game really be playable on this computer? So they're for comparing machines, not showing real live gameplay, which is why you're watching this video, or at least I hope it is. Now this time around, look at our CPU usage right in the middle here. We're right at about 50% usage, but it has spiked up to 60-65% at times. Now this, the R5-1600X, is a 6-core 12-thread CPU. Important point, when we're at 50% usage, that means we're essentially using all 6 real cores. Remember this as SMT, which is AMD's version of hyperthreading, and so anytime you go over 50%, you're actually into the, I want to call them fake cores. They're not real cores because they can't actually do work. The CPU can only do 6 things at once, or it can only run 6 real threads at once, but it can schedule 12. It can accept 12 different things from Windows. And Windows is aware of SMT and hyperthreading. It knows which cores are, quote, real and which cores are not. And so it can split the work between those to make sure that it's not just dumping everything onto half of your cores and leaving the other half sitting around doing nothing. One thing that the Ryzen 5 CPU gets you is 2 extra real cores. While it is true that the i7 CPUs from Intel, both the 2600 as well as the 7700K, are a bit faster in the clock speed department, and there are some benefits to being on those platforms. Once you exceed 4 threads or 4 cores, you are into hyperthreading on the Intel platform. The other point that I think is very important to keep in mind is that many people like to do things in the background. Do you listen to music? Do you watch YouTube videos or watch Netflix while you're playing games? Perhaps you have 2 monitors, or perhaps you like to live stream your games. All those take some level of CPU power. If games now all use 4 cores, and they do, and many use more, The Division, Battlefield 1, GTA 5, all use a little bit more than 4, you have nothing left for anything else. With a 6-core 12-thread CPU, you absolutely have 4 real cores for the game, and then you have 2 more cores for everything else, meaning Windows background tasks, Windows updates, which run whenever the heck they want anyway, live streaming, watching videos can all be done on the extra cores, not slowing down your performance. This doesn't mean your game will run faster, it means your game will run smoother. This is an extremely important point that I'll probably make in every one of these videos. The i7-7700K is undoubtedly the fastest gaming CPU you can buy in the world today. If all you care about is the highest possible average frame rates in the world, you don't need to watch this. It's the i7-7700K without exception. That being said, please note something very important. I own the i7-7700K. I also own Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7 machines. I play games on my Ryzen 7 machine, not my i7-7700K. Not because it's faster, but because it's smoother. I can multitask while playing and it doesn't impact the performance. The minimums are higher. The overall frame pacing, the stability of frame delivery is smoother. While the averages are better, while the total maximum performance is actually much better on the 7700K, sometimes by 20+%, the experience on Ryzen is better in my opinion, and that's why I actually play my games on my Ryzen chips and not my 7700K. Wendell over at Level 1 Techs actually did an excellent video on this. In fact, he did a series of videos on this. First, he did a double-blind test where the game player did not know whether it was a Ryzen or an Intel machine. And essentially, the answer was they couldn't tell the difference, that they were so minor as to be trivial. So the actual experience of playing on Ryzen versus Intel's Kaby Lake, when you don't know what machine you're playing on, basically is the same. Second, when they looked at the frame performance over time, when they pulled up the graph of the actual stability of frame delivery, it was absolutely totally clear that the 7700K was in fact faster, but the Ryzen was smoother. So go check out the Level 1 Techs channel if you're interested in seeing that, because frankly, they did a lot of work to produce all those charts and do all those tests. Okay, that's enough on the Ryzen 5 chip. Let's take a look at a 6-year-old Intel i7-2600K CPU. Now please note that there is well over an hour of actual gameplay benchmarked and tested here. I'm trimming them shorter simply because I know that most of you don't really want to watch an hour of gameplay and listen to me drone on and on for an hour at a time. In order to make the average game performance fair and reasonable, I actually tested between 20 to 30 minutes on each computer. That and I was having fun doing missions. So I am trimming these shorter, but there was well over an hour, actually closer to an hour and a half of video between these 4 machines. Interestingly enough, the i7-2600K does suffer from a single core performance that is not impressive compared to the 7700K right up until you overclock it. This CPU overclocks easily to 4.5 gigahertz, and if you own a 2600K and you don't have it overclocked, you might be pleasantly surprised. Now, your experiences may vary, but if you watch the video that I posted on this, this has a 120mm $60 liquid cooler installed. Nothing fancy whatsoever. Look at our temperatures, 61 degrees, 65, under 60 degrees Celsius on a 2600K, overclocked more than 1 gigahertz above its base speed. The base speed of this chip is 3.4 gigahertz. We're at 4.5 on all 4 cores, and this thing is running like a dream. I have to say that the 2600K, frankly, runs cooler than the 7700K, which I find ironic and sad in many ways. It is worth noting that the 2600K does use double the power of the 7700K. It uses more electricity if you care about such things. If you look at our GPU usage while we're playing, and I'm not calling it out every second, but do watch the numbers in green while this gameplay is going on and I'm droning on in the background, you'll notice that the GPU does not drop below 100% all that often, but there it just dropped to 76. Now the sample period is once per second, so of course it's actually changing more often than this, but if I set it to a higher sample period, it does at some point actually start to affect the performance. So once per second is generally a good polling period if we don't want to impact the overall game performance. The second generation or Sandy Bridge series of processors from Intel came out in January of 2011. This CPU is more than 6 years old. It's incredible how well this still plays everything today. And if you take anything away from this series of videos, it's this. You don't need a new CPU as much as you need a new graphics card. This CPU plays this game and every other game that I have thrown at it just fine. I have yet to find anything that really plays noticeably better on a 7700K versus this 2600K. Where do I really see the difference between the 2600 and 7700K? Where do I see a benefit to getting a much newer system? Non-gaming performance, Windows performance, multitasking. The real benefit in the past few years has been the platform improvements. Now, power consumption is also part of it as well. The newer chips use far less power, but it's the platform. It's a faster DMI speed. It's the much faster DDR4 memory speeds. It's the PCI Express 3.0 bus. It's USB 3.0 and 3.1. The motherboards, the platforms, that has all improved dramatically. One thing I notice when installing Windows updates, when opening multiple programs, when doing non-gaming tasks, I do notice and feel a difference between the old and the new systems. And me personally, being a heavy user of Windows with all the stuff that I do, it's worth it to me to have the newer systems. Gaming? Nah, doesn't really need it. Frankly, gamings are not nearly as CPU dependent most of the time as they are graphics card dependent. Even games such as Grand Theft Auto 5, which is known to be a heavily CPU bound game, frankly play fine on 6-year-old Intel chips just as well as they play on brand new ones. As much as it pains me to cut it out because this mission was cool and I did actually successfully complete it, we're going to jump to the 7700K. We're 18 minutes into this video and I'm trying to keep it to 20 minutes, although that's not going to happen because I want to put at least a few minutes of gameplay footage in here. While I don't want to put the full hour and a half in here because I realize that very few people would watch that, I want to put at least 5 or 6 minutes of each game in here. If I only put 30 seconds or 60 seconds of gameplay, it's not enough to let you actually watch the performance numbers cycle through, to go through combat so you can see what's going on. Part of my goal with these videos is not just what I'm saying in the voiceover, it's so you can watch the gameplay and watch the real-time numbers and have an idea of the fluctuation of VRAM usage and main RAM usage and how the frame rate goes up and down, how the graphics card and CPU usage and temperatures move. Just showing you screenshots or even 30 seconds of footage wouldn't share that information with you and wouldn't make these videos much better than just putting up charts and calling it a day. One interesting aspect that I just noticed, believe it or not, I should have said something earlier. If you look in the very, very top left corner of the screen, you'll see the time counter for the AMD Relive software that is tracking the actual record. That's interesting because NVIDIA Shadowplay doesn't put it up there. I only recently started using the Relive software. Most of the benchmarks and tests I've done in the past were using NVIDIA Shadow Play if it was at higher resolutions, or the Elgato HD 60 Pro hardware capture card if I was doing 1080p. Now that capture card only does 1080p, so I have to use the included capture software with the graphics card for 1440p or 4K. Now your question might be, well, these are all 1080p. Why in the world am I not using the capture card? First of all, simplicity and ease of use. By simply doing it on these computers, I don't have to connect the two machines, I don't have to switch it around. It is faster just to do the recording on the machine. It affects the frame rate and the performance a little bit, but I have tested it multiple times in multiple games, and it's a very, very minor difference. We're looking at maybe, what, 4 or 5 frames per second right now we'd have. Okay, so fine, you'd be at 105 frames a second instead of 100. Big deal. Does that really matter? Well, if it does, fair enough, but the point should be clear that it doesn't impact the performance enough to matter. The game's either playable or it's not. One thing that I did actually try doing when I was editing these videos, because I do render these at 4K. Now this is a 1080p file, but I upscale them to 4K when I actually upload them to YouTube, and the reason for that is because YouTube's bandwidth on 1080p videos is dreadful. Gameplay videos at 1080p on YouTube are just awful. They are heavily compressed. Even if you only have a 1080p monitor to watch these on, you can set the video file to 4K and get the full detail. More data will be transmitted and it'll simply be downscaled to 1080p, but it looks much better. So if you want to see a better image, even if you don't have a 4K monitor, click the gear icon in the bottom right corner of the YouTube window and manually switch it to 2160p, and you will get a much better view. Just for the sake of putting it on film, I'm going to put a cut in here and jump to about 15 or 16 minutes into this record. It doesn't show anything really different than the previous did, but since I just noticed, and I kid you not, I just noticed that that timer was up there, it just goes to show that there's always something new to learn. I want you to see that this test on the 7700K did in fact run to 20 plus minutes long. I actually ended it just after 20 minutes, but I cut it to about the 16-minute mark so I could talk for another couple of minutes and not run out of gameplay footage before I switched to the actual, to the charts. Because I am going to put a chart at the end, even though I said I don't like charts. You know, it gives you the numbers so that you can take a look at them. One quick reminder, links to various builds and playlists will be down in the video description below. I did a $1,500 build on this i7-7700K. I have also built the FX-8300 machine, and a full build list, a playlist of videos will be down in the description below. I've not yet built a Ryzen 5 machine, but I built a Ryzen 7, and frankly, you could build the same machine just swapping the CPU out from a 7 to a 5 if you don't care about having 8 threads versus 6. The i7-2600K, I have one video on which just shows the installation of the CPU. That particular machine used to have an i5-2500K, and I swapped it out for the 2600K simply for benchmark purposes. I've owned that machine since new. It used to be my primary machine. I upgraded it years ago, and it's simply done backup duty as a file server for a while. The other links in the video description below will be to Amazon and Newegg. There will be links to all of the processors and all of the items that I've talked about in this video. And if you found this useful and helpful, be sure to remember to use those links down there, because I buy everything that I review other than the manufacturer samples sent to me. I buy those from Amazon and Newegg. They both offer great customer service, and I cannot recommend them enough. Okay, that's enough talking. Let's get to the benchmark results. Here we are with the 4 processors in order. FX-8300 averaged 81 frames per second with a minimum of 42. 81 is really good, and it was completely playable on the FX-8300. The fact that that is by far the slowest CPU here in terms of total performance, that's very respectable. However, it was not smooth all of the time. There were definitely moments where it was choppy and there were stutters and frame hitches. So if you want a smoother performance, the FX-8300 is not for you. Now, is it worth upgrading to an R5-1600X if you have an FX-8300? Maybe. Now, the average frame rate only jumped from 81 to 93. That is only a 12 frames per second improvement. Although a better graphics card would help there, we are somewhat held back by the RX 480. Look at the improvement in the minimum frame rate. We jumped 18 frames per second on the minimum. And because the maximum was higher, it was actually much smoother. If you have a 60 Hz panel, you could set VSync to be on and you would have a rock solid steady 60 frame per second, never deviating game performance on a Ryzen 5 1600 and it would be a wonderful experience. So what about the two i7 CPUs? Almost identical performance. Please note that there is a small 200 MHz clock speed difference between these two chips, and the main system RAM speed difference is noticeably different. 1600 MHz on the 2600K versus 32 on the 7700K. Now, normally RAM speed doesn't make a big difference, but jumping from 1600 to 3200 is a fairly large jump. There's also platform differences, motherboard differences, etc. But the fact of the matter is, a 6-plus-year-old, almost 6.5-year-old 2600K is only 5 frames per second on average behind the brand new 7700K. And the 7700K runs hotter, go figure. Now the minimum frame rate on the 2600 is a little bit lower, but frankly all of these were immensely playable with a little bit of choppiness on the FX-8300. Now I'm not comparing this in this video to i5s and to other chips because frankly it would just be too big of a project to do 10 different processors in one video. I might do a mid-range test at some point, but this is designed to determine if you had a top-of-the-line chip 5 or 6 years ago, if you have an FX8 core chip, if you have an i7-2600K, is it time to upgrade? And the answer ultimately is maybe. What you should definitely take away from this is if you have a 3 or 4-year-old graphics card, what you probably need is a new graphics card, not a new CPU. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with that big huge button directly below the video. Post your comments below the video and remember to check out that video description. Links to all the good stuff is down there. The playlist, the build videos, Amazon and Newegg, as well as my Patreon link down there. If you like these videos, if you like the analysis and the in-depth look at all of these processors and graphics cards and everything else that I do on my channel, please consider supporting. Every dollar donated through Patreon will go directly back to the channel to provide unboxings, hardware reviews, performance guides, and all sorts of cool, amazing tech-related deals. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video.